So anyway, welcome to The Good Fight, which hopefully no fists will be thrown, but maybe there'll be verbal disagreements, or maybe not. I'm Alan McBride for the next hour, or actually slightly less than an hour. We'll be leaving the politicians aside, mostly, because you can't quite get rid of them, but we're going to take the focus off them, I think. And we're going to ask what artists and activists and dreamers and panels can do to promote civic change. So it's going to be fairly informal because there's not that many of us in the room. I'm going to ask a few questions, try and get some answers, which I don't think will be a problem from this crowd because they show all the signs of being able to talk. And then you can kind of join in. Questions appreciated, they have question marks. But short statements, your feeling on things is fine, just don't audition to be in the panel for next time. It's 5 years before the next Good Friday group celebrations. And I'm going to I know one of you better than the rest, so I'll come to you last.
Okay.
You're my safety. But Connor and Becky are from Another World Belfast. And I just want to say, what does Another World Belfast do? Better you describe it than me read it off the page.
So we're called Another World Belfast, and we've got a message to show some love. Our main aim is to provide really practical solutions to poverty and the things that people are struggling with out there. We would supply toiletries and underwear as well as clothing to people experiencing hardship, and we really believe in building the new, and it really runs with this theme at the same time, but of creating spaces and places and interactions that bring marginalised people together. So that's our bit. What did I miss? We've got a shop.
They've got a shop.
Becky doesn't necessarily talk, but she kind of...
No, if
telepathy puts words into his mouth.
Very much that. Becky's actually contracted not to talk. But no, we've got a shop up behind Castle Court. It's called the Show Some Love Store, or the Show Some Love Shop, because we just changed the name of it. But it's a place, kind of like a charity shop on steroids, where it looks and feels fabulous, and it kind of really represents what we try to do as an organisation, which is make things better, is to add something a little bit extra, is to do what a lot of queer people and the LGBT community do best, which is polish turds and roll them there. Really, we're trying to bring a bit of light and energy and love and compassion to the third sector, because sometimes it's a little bit solemn, and we want to attract as many people as possible to get involved. So that's the crack.
Thank you. So that's Becky and Connor. We'll allow you to have the mic the next time. Elspeth Fisher, you are a filmmaker and researcher based in Belfast, and in double quotes, you specialise in experimental and non-fiction styles that make work that places counter-hegemonic themes on screen, which I think means that you focus on documentaries about people who stand up to those who wield power. But tell us a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, thank you, absolutely. So yes, as you say, we make mostly non-fiction work, and at the minute with more of a focus around community and activist and feminist themes. So completed PhD research at Queen's, which involved making a feature film entitled Let Us Be Seen, that stemmed from personal experience and work with feminist groups, but then branched out to sort of connect the dots between arts, activism and educational groups in Belfast, particularly around the decriminalisation of abortion and legalisation of same-sex marriage, but really spanning a lot of other issues as well, and learning from those in the film, including the fantastic Becky and Connor here as well from Another World Belfast. So that was that project, and then more recently I've been working with other community groups and currently working on a short film with retired nurses. So as you say, I'm interested in centering those narratives that maybe often do get overlooked, and trying to show those other ways of facing up to power and everyday activism.
Okay, and that seems like a good introduction to Louise Matthews, who does something entirely different, but no, it's pretty much the same. I knew you first as an actor,
Yeah.
and then it turned out that you're a really good playwright as well. And it turned out you've got all kinds of strings to your bow. But tell us a little bit about Not On Our Watch, which was a play that was written relatively recently, put on recently. I'm not sure, anybody seen Not On Our Watch? Any hands going up?
Alright.
Okay, you really want to.
Yeah.
So tell them a little bit about what was it about and why you did it.
Not On Our Watch was commissioned by Kibosh Theatre Company and the Unite the Union, and it was about the story of the women of Regina Challey Women's Hostel. and how they fought to keep that hostel running, and to prevent it from closure by the, what do you call them? I
The
forgot.
mean people. I think it's probably Department for Communities or Department
Legion
for
of Mearing.
Oh, Legion of Mearing.
So the pretending not to be mean people. So it was about these women and how they fought so hard to just raise awareness that this was the only service for women in Northern Ireland with complex needs that had found themselves homeless. So for women in that position, if you have any sort of mental health issues or addictions or external trauma that you're managing at the same time, then Women's Aid isn't really the place for you, because that has to be family friendly. So it's for children to be around, so they can't really mind complex needs. And this was the only one in the north of Ireland, and it was being closed. So that started the campaign, Women Demand Better, and from that, Not on Our Watch, I wrote that, and it's doing a good job of making people trying to encourage activism through arts. Yeah.
So, I mean, the context of today, I suppose we should have said welcome to you on behalf of Cormila, who are kind of organising the event. We should say that, otherwise.
I keep moving positions.
Yes, and there.
Where's that?
It's like a game for me to play. But I mean, the context of 25 years after an agreement was made by some men and a smaller number of women up in Castle Building. So that's kind of the context of why we've been triggered into having a panel and talking about some of this stuff today. But so we kind of wondering, maybe at the beginning we should ask, in terms of like homelessness, which is one of the kind of the sectors that you're dealing with. I mean, has much changed in the last 25 years? You know, is there much sign of actual interest in what is usually quite a non-sexy kind of, you know, politicians often condemn problems about homelessness, but they never seem to do a huge amount to actually deal with the problems. So has there been much change, do you think, over time?
Yeah, loads of change. Things have got far, far worse. That's the answer. They have, inequality is deepening. It's continued to get deeper. You know, we have wild, unbridled consumerism and capitalism that is just creating, like, we didn't have anywhere near the number of billionaires 10 years ago, never mind 25 years ago. And with that, the more billionaires that we have, the more hoarding wealth that happens globally, then somebody has to pay for that, and who pays for it is usually the most vulnerable in our society. So we get asked a lot, and particularly over the last few years with COVID and things, as well as we're starting to come back from that, we get asked a lot about, you know, COVID, cost of living crisis, are we seeing much of a rise? And the answer is yes, of course, but it's not necessarily in the people who are already having the hardest of times. Actually, what's happening is just the people in the middle who were just getting by okay, those people are now getting pushed to the edge. Those people who are often working are using food banks. They're not able to afford to feed their kids. They're having to get extra help. And then there's also the additional level of shame and taboo that sits in society as well about poverty, because now we have the bling generations, you know, where excessive wealth is fashionable. You know, thankfully we're starting to come away from people understanding that, you know, the Kardashian trend is actually really deeply distasteful, you know, especially with what's going on. So not that anybody would have wished COVID on the world, but one thing it did do was help people to understand that everybody's a little bit closer to poverty than we all were led to believe that we were. So I'd like to think, I mean, sometimes you wouldn't believe it by hearing people talk, but I do think that people are starting to be more community minded, starting to think about, you know, things like the mental health understanding that is really coming now. Things like that people are starting to connect the dots with. So in terms of going back to your original question, I don't think that there's necessarily like any signs of improvement. If anything, things are going really sternly in the wrong direction, but there is glimmers of hope starting to come, and it's through events like this. It's one of the things that we're trying to do, Elspeth's trying to do, Louise is trying to do, is we're all trying to reach audiences that we wouldn't otherwise have reached. And that's what we can do as artists and activists and creatives and people that can think about things like how branding works, how social media works. You know, we're trying to use the tools that exist for communication on brands and things like that. We're trying to co-opt that almost and push it into a more wholesome and meaningful message that we all start to try and think about each other a wee bit more. Yeah.
Okay, Elspeth, it's as if, I mean, we put a lot of faith at the ballot box in electing the best possible people that we can out of those who volunteer to do it. So sometimes the list isn't great, but we kind of trust them a lot of the time. We give them the responsibility to look after us. They're kind of like parents for society. You know, they have the budget, they have the pocket money to hand out, they have, in theory, advisors and people to kind of help them see what needs done. Why is it then that you're so busy, and everybody in this panel is so busy actually raising awareness on issues, on people who have vulnerabilities, on those sections of society that are otherwise forgotten? I mean, why do you think it is that, I mean, is this just normal, that this is what should be expected? Or is this, are you kind of caused a failure that your art could be different, but it has to be focused on real lives because those are really, really important?
Yeah, well, I don't think it should be normal. I think people here are all too used to it, and so there's this sort of vicious cycle of, because the government is so dysfunctional, that means there's such a strong grassroots sector, because everybody's always had to fill the gap in services that are not provided for by our government, and you see that time and time again. Whilst I think, as Becky was saying, there's obviously this sense that things for many are getting so much worse, there's also reason to take hope in how just a few individuals can instigate a lot of change and set up organisations and do great things, which I think is why I fell into moving back here and getting so involved in the grassroots. You know, I don't place much faith in those on the hill to do anything, as we've seen. There's not been a government now again. There wasn't for over 3 years when I was conducting research as well, and that was what inevitably even led to changes like decriminalisation of abortion and legalisation of same-sex marriage, and we still don't have local services for that from our government. So there's always a new thing to be fighting for, and there's always amazing groups of people trying to do that. And yeah, for me, it's often very much not the politicians, unfortunately. But I think that is why the art is so important, and everybody can be sending different messages in different mediums, and it's fantastic, as you say, through social media, through theatre, through film. Everybody has little niches that they're all working away in to spread similar messages of hope, and that's what I take comfort in as well.
What drives you to write the kind of plays that you write, to often actually take parts in plays that you take part in? I mean, what drives you to that kind of...
Allowing people to be seen. I think that what breaks my heart the most is the people that are being squashed by criminal policies that that undermine working class, that undermine the rights to earn a decent living wage, that cause poverty from their systems of what's meant to be a social security benefit, and is actually starving people and actually causing homelessness within our communities across all the UK as well. It's letting people know that you're not alone, and that if we do come to things like this, or we do see a play or a film that you can identify with, that's who you join, that's who you start learning from and following, and it starts a movement. And I think that that's the sort of theatre that I'm interested in, and the sort of work why I love the work of the rest of the panels as well, is because it's reaching out and allowing people to have their own authority to stand up to it, and there are people that are going to stand with you and try to change society for the better, and especially for our most vulnerable, which is exactly what is happening, is that they're the ones that are suffering the most. So it's justice, really, social justice, I think, that drives me.
Okay. One last question from me, and then I'm going to let you guys ask some questions. If you're making a care pack, or if you're making a film, or kind of talking to people, if you're writing a play, who inspires and informs what you're doing? It's kind of a leading question, this, because I think I know the answer for one, and I think I'm going to guess the answer for others, but I just want to kind of confirm. But where do you get your info from? Where do you get your...
I would say our local politicians are a fantastic source of inspiration. Inspiration, at least, to absolutely do none of that. It's a good kind of, there's a good base there to kind of run as far away from as possible. But for us, it's sort of, it almost sounds twee, but it's really the people that use the services. And
Correct answer, thankfully.
Yes.
Have a point.
Yes, but it is it's the people who use the services, and often we are kind of ones. I think we're one step away. We'll make up the pack, and we'll often give those packs to an organisation or to a group or whatever else. We now have a little bit more interaction with our sort of people that use the services. But I think there's a few people that I have to remind myself of the conversations that we've had. Maybe someone that's called out because they've seen you on social media and their family's struggling. I think if you know who I'm thinking of, a very, very sweet man. I won't tell you any more about his business, but just a genuine working class, hard working person who actually, through his set of circumstances and his family's set of circumstances, no matter how hard they tried and how hard they worked, they couldn't do it, and they can't do it, they can't survive the way they need to, and then it calls back to them what you were saying before. It's the expectation on society to have, if you've got a couple of kids, to have them in the right, like even the right socks, and to use when you go to PE, the right deodorant. It has to be branded. It's like one of the things we focus on is that, one of the questions that we ask, we'll try to mix the products so that, yes, you get the things that you need, and you might get a few things that are, I don't know what it is, Tesco Value or whatever it is, but we'll also give a few lovely wee bits, and if they're for the kids, we'll put a few bits in for the mummy and whoever else. But it really is, it's people who use the services that provide that, and then often for us, we would find for a lot of grassroots groups that are welcoming, we would find that then those people feel welcome and empowered to then come and actually help us out. So it becomes more of a it becomes more of a it's more about an exchange, it's more about sharing than it is just about sort of putting your hand out and taking, and that the kind of the feeling and the negative energy that comes with that.
Can I just add one more wee point?
You
just
can.
in a wee bit of your last question, more than anything else, whenever Conor talking about politicians, I think it's really, really important that whenever we're talking about the context of the Good Friday Agreement as well, I think it's really important that we remind ourselves and that we speak to both our audience and the people that will be watching this on the recording via our social channels that, now, don't get me wrong, we've got some really stellar, amazing politicians at the minute that are doing a really good job. They really care. They're fighting the good fight, as we say. But we also have still got a fear of good people going into politics and actually making change because our country unquestionably is still organised crime lockdown. Do you know what I mean? People are still getting death threats. They're still not wanting to put their head above the parapet for fear of their personal safety, their family's safety. And that is one of the reasons why we have some brave souls out there that are saying the right things, but not enough. And we still have too much control where, like even just watching Biden coming in the news, and we've got the Clintons coming this week and things as well. But we don't have prestige here in politicians. We don't have experts going in to make things better. Often we're still in this tit for tat space. Yeah. So what we would love to see is more people, and hopefully that will be a bit of the legacy going into the next 25 years, is that as we have more people who grew up without seeing that, and then that doesn't include me, I was 18 when the Good Friday Agreement was signed, do you know what I mean? But people Connor's age and Elspeth's age and Louise's age. But hopefully the legacy is that now that we've got this far with peace, that we have got less of the intergenerational trauma that has happened. It still exists, but if we can have less of it and we can have less of the stigma of going into politics and actually making change, I have some hope that the next 25 years has some better, braver, more honest people who are not just there to curry favour and votes, that are actually in there to make change. So sorry for that, wee extra kind of.
Can I just jump on the end of that? I do youth work as well, so for years, as well as working as an actor, I worked as a youth worker and I teach drama classes and I devise new plays with children based around whatever their issues are. And every time we get funded to try and do big cross-community projects, so what are the issues? I want to do a new issue-based drama. It is always so forward-thinking. It is always so progressive. The hope I feel working with teenagers is amazing, and I absolutely agree, Becky. That's what's going to happen. We're breathing out the dinosaurs. Do you know?
Slowly aging, okay.
So But the teenagers are like, I'm the same age as you. But the teenagers today are all about gender equality, all about equality of income, of housing, of, you know, and these are the things they're worried about. None of them talk about, if they talk about sectarianism, they talk about people in their school who bring it in, and there's only one or two of them, and that causes problems, but they can identify it and they can see that they have a problem. You know, so they know that there's a danger, but it isn't theirs. They don't own it. Do you know? And it's so good. It's so hopeful. Like,
no, you're absolutely right. Even I've worked with young people as well, and they're telling me in their school they have queer societies, they have feminist societies, and they're like, will you bring and show a film in the school? And I'm like, that's what I think is amazing, when you can reach those audiences and they are actively doing that already from such a young age. It's that's the hope for the next 25 years, as you say.
So often, not so often, it doesn't happen an awful lot, but if we do get a faggot shot out of the window, or a whatever, you know, a dodgy message or a look or something, some sort of aggression because I don't know I'm wearing a bloody skirt, it's often the adults or people, the adults, funny, I'm also one.
But you're only 18.
I'm trying.
More adulty adults.
But it's often older people that can't necessarily, even when you describe it, get their head around it, but it's younger people that are around us, some of our volunteers, some of the people that sort of are in and around our projects, that just get it. And it's, without, you shouldn't go into an explaining space, because you're used to doing that with your folks or your teachers or whoever else, and they'll be able to explain it quicker. Oh, did you feel this because of this, and is it because of this, and what about, you know, how did you feel from that? How are you going to recover from that? Even the language that we have for mental health has greatly improved, and that could really solve so many of the issues in and around politics, in and around how we use our voices and feel brave enough and safe enough to say what we think.
So stay for the second panel, which is some younger people who are going to be thinking, who are involved on the edges. They're the kind of people who turn into politicians, but don't tell them that.
Yeah.
But they're being bred into that mode, and we'll be talking a bit about Good Friday and what it means to them, and looking forward at 3:30. These are people who are either very late or very early for the next panel, but they're very welcome.
it's the artist.
To be very, I like that. I kind of nearly want to ask you more about kind of young people and how we kind of tell their stories, but I'll hold that question, and if I forget, just answer it anyway. But I want to give you guys a chance, because you've kind of heard a bit of a few random thoughts here. Anything you want to kind of ask, or you want to kind of reflect on what you've heard? Don't be shy. Yes?
Thank you everybody for your contributions. It's really interesting. I'm just wondering what the panel thinks about voter apathy, and particularly amongst young people, and our duty. I'm in the older age group probably in the room, in terms of how we present politics and the idea of rule of law and governance. And I mean, yes, we are in a state where it doesn't work, but I suppose if we look at other countries like Nigeria or Iraq, where there's been a complete collapse of rule of law and governance, what is our responsibility? And my son and his friends turned 18 coming up to the last assembly elections, and I was trying to encourage them all to register to vote. And it's hard, you know, they don't have a utility bill with their name on it if they're still living at home with their parents. You know, maybe have a provisional driving license, maybe don't. But the young people that you're working with, who are maybe in very temporary accommodation, don't have documentation. How easy is it for young people to participate full stop through registering, and how much appetite is there to vote amongst the young people in the groups that you're coming into contact with? And this was the third bit, is what's our role in terms of promoting a positive view about participating in democracy and aspiring to effective democracy?
Any other questions? I'm going to take a couple, and then we can talk about them for a while. So yes, so you.
That first.
Not first.
You sure? You sure? In any particular order, there were kind of 3 parts, of which I can name 2 of them. But I mean, voter apathy, and how do we kind of, I guess, encourage people to participate in democracy, which does sound a bit like what you're actually doing, basically.
I think that theatre really helps. So there's no apathy in any of the groups I work in. Because it's feet on the street, it has to be done. If you want something for your family and for your community, then you have to actively engage in trying to get that. And organisations like PPR and who are always engaging with trying to promote change and getting people to be part of the process of finding change. And I think for us, as in devising theatre with young people, when they start to identify problems, it's who are the politicians that fix these sort of things, who are the good guys that want to help here, you know, and a lot, well, there's about one politician that goes to a group. I write a play with them every year, and there's only one politician in the north that ever goes to see that, and it's always issue based and always really hard hitting. But yeah, you can't get them engaged with the kids, and I think that that's something that needs to flip. Is that they need to be looking for their vote, and the apathy belongs to them. Yeah.
One other, I suppose, like what is the trend with young people now? Young people don't switch on like we used to do and watch channel 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, where people digest their media is social media or it's via YouTube. So on YouTube at the minute, there's a huge swathe of new documentary making that's happening that is looking at historical, geographical issues, looking at borders. You know, Johnny Harris is like an incredible documentarianism, and people are now redigesting and relearning history that isn't necessarily being written from the point of view of the victor, as it were. So now the young people are interacting with the bunny quotes facts in different ways. So they're relearning and redigesting what our history and what our structure looks like. So if you were a young person now starting to look at it from a very unemotional point of view, just looking at the facts and the way things are here, and you make reference to failed states, for example, what would incentivise a young person to register to vote now whenever they think, hang on a second, so the people that probably resonate the most with me, if I'm not interested in getting into the whole green and orange debate, actually if I want to go for a more centre-leaning party that isn't putting themselves on one side, why would they bother? Because sure, what's the point? You know, our structure and the document of the Good Friday Agreement that was set up and it was fit for purpose when it was, but we have come way further on and it's no longer, truly it's no longer fit for purpose because it's no longer representative of the people of this country. You know, we've got 17% of people that identified as being of non-religion. That's only the people who wrote it down. You know, we have to think about what additional people that said, well, you know, I'll go for this because it's my community. You know, and it's like, how do we ask the question, and also who asked the question? Do you know what I mean? So have we got facts that say how we are made up, who we are made up by, and how we think and how we act? And then have we got democracy that is representative of that? Young people are smart now, they can see it, they've got a basis for comparison with other systems that have been set up using the same template, that now they can look and compare and contrast and then say, well, until that changes, so until we're able to look back and say, what parts can we keep that we still need? What parts do we need to tweak that is representative of who our communities are now? And the most key bit about it is we are no longer two communities. You know, I have to say that Kate Nicholl, whenever she was mayor last year, and Tina's done a great job this year too, but Kate Nicholl last year, it was her one consistent drum that she beat the whole year, which is we are no longer two communities, we are many communities here, and our structure does not reflect that. So I can understand the apathy that comes in there. So if we want more people to vote, and we want to try and engage people, then we have to change what they're voting for. Do you know what I mean? But we've also seen the growth of Alliance and the Greens and those sort of centre-leaning parties getting more traction. That gives hope to people too. So I would say, like, try and get people to still keep voting for what we've got, because those votes still do get seen in terms of how numbers come.
Absolutely. Even if you encourage people to register and submit blank ballots, I've said to people before, that at least is seen, counted as an abstaining from voting. Whereas if you're not registered, you're not on the system at all. It's not picking up that you don't have faith in anyone to represent your views. So even if you want to do that, at least that makes a bit more of a statement then, like, you know. So I think, as you say, absolutely, you're counted, and it's not along those binaries anymore, and that is the problem.
I'm going to jump in and join the panel for a second. It's not my right as the chair to do this. It's just I'm just doing it. But I mean, I do stuff with politics in Action, which works with school groups. It almost kind of takes schools from different places. So it could be kind of across the kind of the organisational divides of schools, so kind of effectively religion or cultural background. It could also be about class. Sometimes we take a grammar school and then we find the local secondary school and we kind of bung them together. And we ask the kids to come up with, and they have to identify an issue that they want to work with. And that can be everything. They've looked at abortion, they've looked at how bad relationship sex education is. You want to see the joy on people's face when they all vote across the 4 issues and decided they didn't want to talk about public transport in Macrofelt, but they wanted to talk about sex ed. And it turns out that they didn't realise that the English teacher was the sex ed coordinator who thinks that the whole thing was really noisy and needs fixed. So she was delighted, and we had words and vocabulary being used so professionally and sensibly by kids that the rest of us would all be going, he just said. It was glorious. We wrote they came up with like a private members bill, and we none of the MLAs really wanted it, so we got a children's commissioner at that stage who kind of came and went, that's brilliant, you'd missed several things, and then she carried it around in her bag and handed it out to people. But why I tell you this story is that on Tuesday, as part of the grand stuff happening at Queen's, those groups, different school groups, were all coming together, and this year they kind of all were told, were steered a wee bit to look at the kind of, what about the Good Friday Agreement, or what about all the agreements that have happened since? Do you like, that you want to keep, that you want to change, that you want to do stuff with? And it's kind of, what struck me by one of the groups I was working with was divided society came up. And I think you've just kind of mentioned it in terms of we're not two communities. I mean, we can be, what they thought of as divided society, they quickly started to say, well, actually transport, east of the ban, west of the ban, that's a problem. The ones who live in town have a lot more opportunity to do stuff than the ones who live on the farm. And then they started to realise about class, and they started to realise about whether you had a home or not. And there was a whole set of divides, communities effectively, and very small communities that got marginalised. But when they got to, I think like two of the largest parties, some of the local MLAs came in, and their first question was, is Northern Ireland a divided place? And the answer from both was no. Other than the constitutional question, we're not divided at all. And then they kind of went through all these other things. And at the end they went, yeah, we're not divided, like I told you. And I kind of leave it as a question. I'm auditioning for the panel next time. Because I'm not sure that they all get the fact that they're not always looking for the other divisions, the other inequalities effectively, which are what divide us usually. And some of them get it, and some of them don't. And so my follow-up question, having finally got to it, none of you ever try this, I'll kill you if you ask me, something like that. But my follow-up question is, how do you make what you're doing, or the work that you're doing, more, if you like, politician-friendly, so that, because I get the feeling that you can probably reach ordinary punters, you can reach kids who are very receptive to good thinking on lots of ideas, but how do you actually, given that the state's not going to go away, we're always going to have like the MLAs unless it really collapses, how do you make what you do actually get into their skin so that they change, so that more of them become interested and more of them become empathetic to what are really serious issues about homelessness, about mental health, about queer communities, about people who are vulnerable? How do you fix, how do you get it to them?
It would be handy if they came and seen art.
So if they don't, what do you
No,
do?
they don't come and see our work, or it's very, very rare that you'll see politicians or any of our MLAs at plays. I'm not sure about film as well, and project launches and campaigns that you are working on. I feel that they just ignore us, and I feel like arts in particular is viewed with such a reductive state of mind within Northern Irish politics anyway, because like we're one of the poorest in all the Isles, British Isles, and Ireland included, we're like about a quarter per head spend from our public money to arts. And the very thing that actually will allow us to have these conversations, allow politicians to get a vibe of what's going on in communities and to engage more with communities through art projects, films and theatre and stuff. And it's been crippled to the point that we're all fighting over money to produce stuff. Yeah. So we can't even get them to come and see things, but what I did do was I wrote them into my play. So they had to come and see it to plagiarize. Wrote a couple of them in and said, oh, I used your words that you did in a public forum, so like technically I'm allowed, but you can come and see it if you want. And then they started speaking about it. So that one.
Okay, so we've got so you have to you bring them into the art, and then they have to react to it somehow.
Well, yeah, of course there are, not to tar everybody the same brush, there are people who are interested. Yeah, I've done a screen with the Green Party there after, in Maverick Bar after the International Women's Day rally, and that was really interesting. But as you say, there seems to always be certain individuals and certain political parties that are never going to turn up in those spaces, but that's why public action is so important as well, and getting on the streets, public art, public, you know, the very idea of spray painting your message everywhere is so important for that reason.
I'm going to check them up.
But yeah, exactly. So that's why that's so important. But
So,
Send me a stencil.
we all need that.
okay, but what you're suggesting is that actually if you get civic action that gets large enough, then actually politicians start to take notice of that and realise it's a bandwagon they need to join in.
Can ignore it.
Yeah, you can.
Okay. So you can lobby them through direct, you can write them into a play or you can have coffee with them, but you can also get a huge rally of people on the doorstep and then they go, well, that's trendy, I want to be part of it. So you call them into it, and we've got a third idea.
I was going to say the
And
same
when
thing.
it
Like
comes
we're not talking to politicians. We're talking to people. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We have found that a lot of again more centre-leaning politicians, not necessarily, but will be attracted to what we're doing, and will pop in and see us in the shop, or you know we'll see them at events and things like that. And we do get attention, but it tends to be that the people that are interested in what we're doing, what we're saying, are already there. And there's a whole swathe of politicians who we are the absolute, oh my god, we are their stuff of nightmares. Do you know, especially when everybody's got a ball going on.
I actually, one day we were walking into City Hall and I was wearing a lovely sort of long dress. We were going to, I just kind of liked
I think we've been shortchanged the
one
today.
Yeah! I was wearing a fleece and I thought, oh, that's something else. That was in the back of the van. But, so I was walking in a dress, and as we were walking towards I don't know how else to describe these doors, but they're the no surrender doors. Does everyone
Exactly.
right the doors, every time you go through there, I find it hard not to shout. And we walked through those doors, and as we were walking up, there was Ian Paisley Jr. walking, and I came a long journey from I would have jumped him in the past. But we'll be polite, we'll be invited, we'll be good, we'll go and get your coffee, we'll make steal your cup. But we were walking anyway, seeing him, and I was like, well, Ian, how's it going this morning? And him and his assistant just looked in kind of horror. I think he handled it quite well. He said something along the lines of, sorry, Becky doesn't know, right?
Was it something along the lines of, do you just open the door for you to let
Oh, you're very stylish. I was getting very stylish in this place. And he
That was a
actually.
good retort.
So my
surprise.
my claim to fame is that Ian Paisley Jr. opened up the no surrender door, me in a dress, which I
And then your fashion sense.
turned out to my fashion sense.
Yeah.
That's an example though of being, of just being there,
Yeah.
of getting yourself in, and as soon as you're in, then you can start to talk about making change happen. It's an example of, I think, the future of our city, the future of our country, in terms of the communities that we work with, and what's looking. I know we're not talking too much about politicians today, but what's looking increasingly like not just the past, the ancient past.
Yeah.
You know, it's people of that part and those beliefs that have tried to pull us back. But before you know it, there's just the right mayor in it, there's just the right person that you get to know, the right politician that you used to party with, used to hang out the back of the Kremlin, that now is standing round about here somewhere.
That is a good party, basically.
Yeah, basically. But it's those people that you could either forge personal relationships with, or the parties that again you get to, and hopefully you get to build a stage where you can't be ignored. You know, you kind of. Their absence is kind of noted in that respect, and if nobody else notes it, we will.
Yeah.
You know, because you build your own platform now. We don't need the Telegraph, we don't need the fucking newsletter. We can build our own platforms to say, actually, this person didn't turn up, and that seems a bit sus, doesn't it?
Did you have a question? No, you've moved on.
Well, I was
Dolores?
just going to make an observation that last year there was before the last lot of elections that never anybody took their seats from, there was all sorts of debates in the MAC. There was one, and Alan McBride had every fact and figure on how much was being put into the arts. And every single party was there, and every single representative was fully supportive of the arts. And yet every time we see more and more cuts to the budget. And yet it's proven that things, like look at before the Good Friday Agreement, the Vote for Yes used a music concert that Stuart Bailey wrote about it a couple of weeks ago in the Telegraph. It was absolutely pivotal in getting young people and more people to vote yes. So the arts has real proven success in reaching people with their messages, and yet they keep reducing and reducing.
Look at the economic argument from the Irish Goodbye.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yes.
Like, that came from the arts, and now it's something else for people to be talking about this country on
Yeah.
the news.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean?
I mean, we brought them the Array Collective won the Turner Prize.
Yeah.
We're a UNESCO City of
And then they
Music,
evict them.
endless Nobel laureates for
Yeah.
poetry, and yet they keep
And you can do that in
getting
discounted terms, like, so you want to see what starving artists will do with even less. But the next arts council grants are basically 10%
We're
less,
sick
which
of
is
starving.
even
I don't want to do it anymore.
I mean, what would how activist would properly funded artists be? I mean, you could be real troubled. I mean, it could be.
Like we're as an organisation really interested in being as independent as possible.
Yeah.
That's the reason why we have a shop, why we have products, why we make our thing. We try to do as little harm to the good that we're doing along the way. So we try to be as ethical as possible. But that's really important to us, and it's really important for us to reach out, not necessarily to the big national companies, but a lot of the local businesses that want to give back, to inspire them to do that, so that we're not necessarily constantly in that funding loop. I feel like and I've watched it happen with so many people in the third sector and in the arts sector, that you just get to a certain level where then you have to shut your mouth because you've already got that mortgage, you got to pay, you got those kids, you got to feed, you can't raise your voice. And it's I feel this is the conspiracy theorist in me, but I feel like that is the system, and that's the way it's been set up. Because it's been set up by wealthy people in power in order to shut us up, to just give us just enough. That's why there is only there's not enough available. That's why it seems like there's just enough. So that we compete with each other and we spend our time saying, actually, your play wasn't as good as my play, and I should have got it for. Well, I don't have a play, by the way. Next year, I'm going for your funding.
I don't even get funded.
But it's that though, it's the kind of competition that comes in, and before you know it, we're fighting with each other, and we're bitching about each other, and we're
That's a distraction from your actual passion for the cause and the people that you wanted to highlight their stories.
And the silencing.
Yeah.
And that starts the silence, and there are plays that I'm sitting on that I want to write, and I'm like, if I write this, I think I might get shot. Do you know what I mean? So, and my partner's going, don't you dare, and I'm going,
And that's probably the one that you need to write because actually,
Yeah.
I may not be as dangerous as you think, but don't take any advice from us because we're not clear. Definitely not sure for that.
There are, I don't know what community you're from, but I swear I have it in my blood, the fear in my blood that I'm going to wake up in the middle of the night and there'll be mass men in our room, that I'm going to be taken away up some hill and shot. And I have to constantly, it actually makes me emotional, I have to constantly remind myself that I haven't done anything wrong, that actually our message is love, that we're really trying our best. But even saying no surrender out loud, that has sent a shiver through my spine. Even speaking about that bloody person, the fear's there. It's kind of, it makes you hyper vigilant for it, and then it inhibits the conversations. You can't just speak freely. I'm almost jealous when you watch events like this in other countries where people are really engaged and they're really aggressive and they're really whatever, they're really expressing themselves. Where then here, there does seem to be a kind of a little sort of mute button that goes on, you know.
And that's what in a post-conflict society that is still quite conflicted feels like. I think that's the reality that. We turned off some of the conflict, but we didn't turn off all of it. And we still live.
Drove it underground.
Yes, and we still live with some of the fear. And if you're not middle of the road, in the middle of one of the sides, then you're not part of a big community.
That's where the funding goes often as well. We're all too aware that it gets divided up between what does your side need, okay great, give it all to that, give it all to that, and then the people that fall between the cracks don't get any of it. I think we're all quite aware of why certain things will never get funding while other things will always get funding.
Like when I grew up talking about anything to do, like I grew up with quite a lot of privilege, and it was, and I went to Metheny as well. Sorry. But, you know, it was a non-denominational school. I was not really aware. I wasn't really aware of the Protestant Catholic thing at all. Do you know what I mean? Like whenever there was a bomb or something in town, my parents avoided the routes until they got me home. Do you know what I mean? So I was brought up in this sort of bubble of safety, which I'm grateful for. Don't get me wrong. But to this day, until I'm 42 now, it was only whenever I was in my mid-30s that I really started, again, going onto YouTube and starting to understand, like, actually properly neutral people that were going back and looking at things, to actually really understand what happened here. Because so many of us are just like, shut it down. You know?
Yeah.
But I'm so glad that now that we've got the 25 years, you know, as well, we all are starting to talk more and starting to understand it. So it's, you know, we're still sitting here talking about it anyway, even though we feel the fear, we have the hypervigilance, so we need more power.
I want to kind of ask a last question, because I think we're coming towards the end, and thank you for your 3 questions, which inspired a whole conversation. And the rest of you need to own those questions as yours, because you're not going to get a chance to ask another one. But you could ask them lots of stuff on the way out. We kind of started off by saying this is about, you know, how do artists and activists and dreamers, what can they do to promote civic change? What can they do anyway, despite the system that maybe doesn't listen to you or doesn't want to do? So I suppose my last question's got to be, you can have one thing that you'd like politicians to do differently when they go back to Stormont, or you can have one thing that you would like just ordinary people to do or think differently, because maybe that's more powerful. Maybe if you do that, the politicians will react anyway. In any particular order, and you can feed any other closing comments that you particularly want to get off your chest into the conversation. I get the feeling that Connor is going to start. If you're called Connor, you are. I was going to call you Becky because I had Becky's name written down.
One thing I would love our politicians to do is mushrooms. To be honest, or in some way to open up their fucking minds. To get out. If you don't do the shrooms, you can get out to your rave. You can have your friends, go to a festival, cover yourself in glitter, get your dick out and dance around the fire. You know, I want real.
The questions you ask that you kind of nearly regret. So.
What
you'd like them to open their minds.
What I would sort of even say is I would like to see more real, and again we spoke about them, some local politicians that are incredible and that are part of our communities that we know and can express themselves. I want to see more of that, but I want to see then spaces that are welcoming to that, spaces that don't make people feel excluded, that are specifically designed to keep marginalised communities out or to make them feel unsafe. Becky probably has a more...
Why do you have the microphone? On behalf of politicians, I'm going to say they probably find themselves quite constrained by the fact that they're in parties, so they have to, you know, you're part of the club, so you have to abide by most of the rules. They do lots of lobbying, and I mean, I know people in the DUP who have big differences of policy with their peers, but they have to very slowly, over 10 years, change those policies. It takes a long time. And sometimes they time out and get, you know, just too tired of it and leave. But it's a tough job. It's not one that they don't always feel open to just be themselves, because they'd be very vulnerable. But they are in a huge privilege, so maybe they need to do more of it. But anyway.
One of the things I would love most of them to do is leave. And I don't mean that in a facetious way. I actually do mean, I think that every single person, we have a real problem here with people who have never left this country and think that this is the way it is. You know, we have the privilege and the benefit of having lived in other spaces and seeing how diversity is so essential for progressive places. Do you know what I mean? Like getting used to people whose maybe backgrounds are different, their heritage is different, their sexuality, gender, ability, all of those things. We don't have that here, and you know, it's really it's a crying shame whenever you see people that have never left this island for more than 2 weeks in Torremolinos to actually go and experience what it's like to go and live and work in another environment. Do you know what I mean? And I kind of feel like that should almost be like a bit of a criteria. It's like, what do you actually bring? Not just like, oh, well, I decided I was going to be a politician. It's like, but why? What's your experience? You know, why have we got people that have got no children or have no experience in the world of education as an education minister? Do you know, why have we got people that have got no financial experience whatsoever in a decision-making role on finance. Like, it's laughable. Do you know what I mean? But at least if we could try and have some people with some knowledge and some people with some external experience where they've actually got some experience in another country that's working, to bring it back here and share some of that.
I totally want to follow on from that, because my dream was, and I know this is a big dream and it's never going to happen, but it would be great. You can't implement a policy unless you've lived it.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you have to experience a policy, and if that means that you have to go from your weekly wage instalment to universal credit and live on that for 5 weeks before you get your pay.
Yeah.
And if you miss an appointment because you have to pick up your children from school and then you have to live another 5 weeks without any income, you cannot implement a policy unless you've lived it. And then we'll see how well our policies are actually designed.
Yeah.
That's what I do.
Follow that.
I know. Well, I'll go on the flip side then
Yeah.
for the people, because everybody's got great messages for the politicians. Just as we've been saying, you know, there's so many great ideas out there, and people here have no shortage of amazing ways of working. So I want people to realise their own power and realise that sometimes just being in a room and having a conversation is really important, and we can keep doing that. There's little everyday acts of activism that we're all already doing, and we need to have more self-confidence in believing the change that can make for everyone.
Yeah, because I mean, I was recording a conversation in the London Library with some of the negotiators of the Good Fight agreement last night, and they talked about going to South Africa 2 times, which was really, really useful because it got them out of the country. It got them to a place where they're all in the same hotel, and even though they weren't meant to be talking to each other, they passed in the corridor, and they talked about the fact that if you could have 2 or 3 friends in other parties, that made negotiations so much easier, because actually you understood where they were coming from and you could have a casual conversation over breakfast. So actually getting them out of the country, that now it's not like living and working somewhere else, but that was really important for them getting to a point where they got locked in castle buildings, that they eventually kind of wore themselves down and find new ways of doing things. I thought it's kind of interesting. It's all that thing of relationship and also understanding the other and actually walking in other people's shoes.
That's what worked in youth work as well. So when we did have a very divided sectarian society, the easiest and quickest way that you could change a child's mind was to get them out of here and get them out together.
Yes.
You know, and if you travelled and you were, my God, I remember going, I was the first year that the EMU project, remember? When they brought the Catholics in, we went to Quartermila. And it works. It works. Like when we went up to Ballycastle, I thought it was in Scotland.
You were pretty close to
I
it.
wondered, was there a time difference and all? But it worked. It worked. It was like, so why did I not know you? You only live around the corner from me. So why am I not allowed to go around and meet you at your school kids in my uniform? And all that just opened up and started to change. Get them out and away together. And it works a treat.
And everyone loves suki juice and taking cheese with you.
Yeah. Where's the woman?
I've been sitting kind of trying to figure out where you moved to, because you've changed seats now for 4th time. But also, I keep staring at this poster, which kind of says it has the big kind of thing of it's in the shelter of each other that it's in the shelter of each other that the people live. And I'm kind of, I suppose, on behalf of Carmela, but also myself, and possibly on behalf of you, thank you for living that out in obviously the work and the creativity and the things that you do, because you very much seem to actually value the fact that people belong here, that they don't all have voices, and that you can provide a little bit of help for their voices to be heard. And I think that's really, really important, and kind of more part of your elbow. And I suspect you've got another 25 years of doing it, but particularly you, Neil, because you're very, so young. But
It's more than that 28 or 25 minutes.
But I think that's important. I think what I take away from some of this today is the fact that we can all do that. And if we're a wee bit more aware of who all is out there who's not like me, then actually we might serve each other, and we might learn from that, and we might make a better place, and we might all live happily ever after. Maybe utopia, maybe the next panel will knock that out of me. But can I thank Connor and Becky and Elspeth and Louise, and can I thank all of you for turning up on a very sunny afternoon.